This is kind of an older video from Bricky. However, I thought that it could make for a pretty interesting discussion, because personally, in my free time, I do enjoy watching, like, documentaries about gaming and how it developed, and people's thoughts about balance and art direction. Another channel that I like to check out, I believe it's called Daryl Talks Games or something along those lines. It's just a personal interest of mine, so... But before we get into the video, do I think that fun should triumph over balance? I would say yes, definitely. Especially if it's a single-player game. If it's a competitive multiplayer game, then that's it's probably a little bit different. I wonder if Bricky will even touch upon that in this video. But generally speaking, if you're not having fun playing a video game, then why are you even playing it, right? I can't think of any other reason to play video games. It's a form of escapism. If you're not having fun and you're just kind of being reminded of how pathetic you are, then I don't know, don't play it. Oh, and before we get into this, if you guys haven't already, please head over to Bricky's channel, give him a like, give him a sub. Link to the original video should be at the top of the description, as always.
This is the GeForce RTX 3060 gaming laptop. It has an NVIDIA RTX 30.
Wait, you're telling me that Bricky got a sponsor from NVIDIA and he still uses like a 1060 or 1080, I think he said in a previous video? That was a lot more recent, I'm pretty sure. Did NVIDIA not hook him up, or did he just not take it? I don't know what the situation is there.
360 GPU, 16 gigabytes of DDR5 memory, and an AMD Ryzen 9 processor. And it was provided by our fantastic sponsor, the one and the only Best Buy. This right here has been my workhorse choice ever since I got it. The build is excellent. The weight...
Bricky, what? You got a badass laptop and you're using it to play Minecraft? I don't think it's even modded to have any of the shaders or the RTX on Minecraft. Oh man, Bricky.
It's really solid, and I enjoy the aesthetic quite a bit. Not to mention the fantastic specs and the new NVIDIA DLSS software. If you haven't used it yet, the NVIDIA DLSS, or Deep Learning Super Sampling Technology, allows it to tap into a deep learning neural network and use AI to boost frame rates and performance across the board, as well as graphical increases. This Asus gaming laptop is a champ because NVIDIA GeForce RTX GPUs can utilize DLSS technology and give games a speed and performance boost with uncompromised image quality for the ultimate gaming experience. And if you want to use it for yourself, all you need to do is look for the NVIDIA GeForce RTX badge on your device that you can see on screen now to know that it is optimized for DLSS. Truth be told, this laptop right here is the strongest one I've ever owned. This thing is honestly a champ. I play a wide variety of games on it in a wide variety of locations, and it handles all kinds of games, whether they're very graphically heavy or just very processor heavy, super easily because of all of that DLSS tech. And it's also due to the big help of Best Buy, which, if you're somehow not familiar, they are the leading brand in a myriad of tech products, and I shop there like genuinely pretty regularly. They provided me with this Asus gaming laptop. And if you want to check out the laptop, utilize the new NVIDIA DLSS technology, or take a look at all of Best Buy's
underwater. Are you kidding me, Bricky? What are we doing?
Or perhaps maybe a little bit of all three. You should check out the description and the link down there. Thank you very much, Best Buy, for sponsoring me, and let's go ahead and get started with the video. Hello, everybody. My name is Bricky, currently serving at 10 to life for taking eating ass literally.
Oh my.
This is the first video of me standing. It may not be the first video I release of me standing, but it is the first video of me now standing for a thing instead of sitting down like normal. We're advancing. We're advancing ourselves now. I welcome you to another program, which is called Bricky Mildly Rants About a Thing That Was on His Mind and That You Get to Deal With. The latest episode being on Joel from The Last of Us, a video that you can see here. You see, I don't have any impressions that I'm a particularly potent content creator. By that I mean, I don't think I can formulate my opinions or explanations as well as many others in my field. I don't have the intelligence of a...
This is kind of one of the things that holds me back from doing a video like this. Like, I would love to talk about, you know, my personal interest or like honestly philosophy sometimes, but I'm such a fledgling in that field, and I'm not exactly the most intelligent person out there. I feel like I wouldn't be able to articulate my thoughts as well as an expert in the field, so I just find that those kind of videos might not be the best to make, but, you know, maybe there's some merit to it, and Bricky went out of his way to make this, so maybe I should give it a shot as well. I don't know, but I totally get where he's coming from.
Dan Olson or Joseph Anderson, nor do I have the script writing skills of Seth or Racevic. All channels I thoroughly enjoy. I'm working on it, of course. Stagnation in content is a pretty good way to kill a channel, but I don't want to pretend I'm somebody I'm not. I like the spot I've kind of carved out for myself. Just enough insight to be more than a normal review, and just enough memes to keep people engaged. However,
as a content creator, there's always this fear that if you try to experiment with something new, your current audience is just gonna, you know, leave you. And then all that success, all that hard work that you put into your channel just ends up for naught because you just end up stagnating then. It's scary, but it's also necessary, and especially with such a highly competitive environment, if you don't change and you don't improve, then you just die and stagnate. I guess that's just how the system works, and the YouTube algorithm, it treats everybody fairly, I suppose. And by fairly, I mean being unfair to everybody.
If I do pride myself on one thing, I think I have some pretty okay rants. If Warhammer has taught me anything, it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. If you yell and you scream with enough gusto, enough power in your chest, someone is going to find you extremely persuasive, either as an ally or an enemy. So when I see an opportunity to rant, I plan to take it. Let's talk about the completely objective concept of video game balance, fun, and the interaction between the two.
The game is fun.
So when we discuss these concepts, I want to talk about fun. You know, this is going to be a high and mighty video when I'm trying to define fun this early into the video. But fun is obviously not something that's easily defined, and it can mean a lot to different people. Whether it's a satisfying gameplay loop, a sense of accomplishment,
fun is different for everybody.
That you really enjoy, unlocks, etc. Your fun differs.
But the general
I want to
concept.
go deeper than that. I want to think about the sense of identity that a game or say choices in the game invoke. Say you're playing Overwatch.
Oh my god.
And you main someone like Tracer. The fun, the identity of Tracer is to be a pest, to move extremely fast, be tricky, do a bunch of damage at close range, be hard to hit, dip in and dip out. That's the Tracer identity. In Titanfall 2, the Legion Titan is a gigantic off gun attached to a robot, and the identity of that Titan is and while it may not be the most effective Titan in the game, it's still the feeling you get. This can be brought down to an even simpler level. Guns in COD even have identities. The fun you create is invoked entirely by what you want the tools of the player to do. The problem, exacerbated by multiplayer games specifically, is that in order to invoke a certain feeling of fun, a certain identity, sometimes that will lead to some extremely aggravating cases of poor balance.
Perfectly balanced is all things.
Oh god. Do even get me started on Aphelios's kit. What the heck was that? I was there when Aphelios was released, and I stopped playing. There were several times in my life where I stopped playing League. I haven't touched that thing in several years now, but yeah, Aphelios, my god, what a champion. If I remember correctly, the designer for Aphelios was even thinking of making his weapons different based on the actual phase of the moon. I'm glad that that didn't happen, but still, this champion is too much. So yeah, we are going to be talking about the multiplayer and competitive experience as well here. In which case, I can understand why it's difficult to find a particular balance. I think in really any competitive multiplayer game, there's always going to be a meta, because you want to design every kind of character, every weapon, every faction to fit a specific sense of fun for a particular person. And as Bricky said here, fun can basically be different for everybody because everything has a certain identity to it. However, in doing so, you end up creating a scenario where some things are just going to be better than other things because of how they're designed and how these things interact with each other, which is probably what we're going to discuss here in this next section. I guess this goes back to the fact that you wouldn't be playing the game in the first place if you didn't find anything fun about it, as well as how there isn't a truly balanced game out there. And then you go on the other end of the spectrum and you look at a card game like Yu-Gi-Oh, where you're probably going to lose if you go second. That's just how it is because of how extremely unbalanced that game is. But so many people still play Yu-Gi-Oh! I think one of the biggest reasons is because it's a really fun card game that has extremely broken cards that make it so that your opponent can't play the game. So only one person is having fun, but they're still having fun, I guess. Is that good? That's probably a matter of perspective. Not for me, though, because I stopped playing that. I could not handle it.
I don't consider myself very good at Overwatch, but I got my way to Masters or whatever because I loved playing Roadhog with his busted hook. That character's identity was on full display as a massive off tank that punished those out of position exceptionally hard so long as I had the proper aim, or whatever you'd refer to as proper aim with Roadhog. Now, I'm not saying his nerf wasn't justified because it was. The hitbox was way too problematic overall. It led to a ton less fun on the other side, the other team.
Yeah.
But when you decide instead to create Bridget afterwards, which, yeah, just maybe you went a little too hard with the identity part of that one when you chose to identify her with the pronouns war and crime. But despite that, creating a good character identity is important as it affects the gameplay loop and lets players gravitate towards things that are not part of their playstyle. This will create, well, maybe not balanced games, fun games. However, in the pursuit of balance, sometimes that identity you created will be compromised. I think the nerfs that Roadhog received were justified and didn't really ruin the character. He is still who he is as they just reined in the jank. But
Okay. Preserving the identity while somewhat maintaining a sense of balance within the gameplay through like a few nerfs here and there or buffs depending on where your character stands within the current meta is the usual approach for basically every competitive multiplayer game. And I feel like that's kind of the only approach that you can have because players gravitate towards specific playstyles and characters because of their identity. And if you kind of change that, then you basically get rid of the thing that those players are playing your game for. I do know that there are some particular characters within certain games that are extremely just overly tuned from the get-go. Like their whole kit is just way too much and it becomes impossible to balance. I don't know what the situation is currently, but a character like that comes to my mind is Akali from League of Legends. I loved playing Akali, but the problem with Akali was because professional players were so easily able to abuse her kit that they could never go a patch without changing them. Once again, I don't know how it is currently, but that was back when I still played it, after the new update to her kit and gameplay. And I guess that was probably just a bad choice in game mechanics, the new mechanics for Akali. So even with the buffs and the nerfs, she just could never find a place in the meta where she felt fair and balanced. Finding a fun and cool and relatable identity for your characters in your game that sounds like a really tough job to make that a balanced experience and an equally fun experience for both parties, right? But I suppose that's just what you have to do if you want to make a game like this. And it's not really something that you think about as a player. As a player, you're just kind of there to complain whenever your main gets nerfed. And I mean, I get it.
my heart goes out to the fucking Doomfist fans out there. I don't pretend to know how to play that man or anything, but I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore. What have they done to Doomfist? There was a problem with Doomfist and how he operated in the game, and changing him may have solved that problem, but it gutted his identity in the process.
Yeah, there it is. I've never played Overwatch, but even I know that Doomfist is just not a very good character because of how his kit operates, and it's just not as good as every other person. The problem therein lies with the mechanics and the identity of the character, potentially not being like fully fleshed out or comparative to anybody else.
Shit, let's walk down the dark, damp stairs into the olden days of League of Legends.
Oh
Aurelion
god, here we go.
It's a baller space dragon with an
Dude, Aurelion Sol was such a cool concept, but I believe when he first got released, he was so jank. He had a very different playstyle, and he was just not a good pick for mid lane. Okay, now, if we're gonna delve into League of Legends, this is kind of my territory. I have a lot to say about this. I mean, you guys probably already know because I have been talking about it even before this was mentioned.
extremely unique kit when he first came out, utilizing rotating stars of various ranges to deal damage. He was a squishy mage that relied on being close, but not too close to your enemy, and finding ways to maintain
positioning
that
was really important.
It was a super weird concept, but a fun one. Problem was that despite him not being incredible overall, pro players were able to abuse him to such a degree where even though the majority of the population couldn't use him effectively.
Okay, no. This is back when the pro players were literally making stuns that were as wide as the entire lane. But what I was talking about was from the perspective of a regular player who usually got ganked and absolutely destroyed in the mid lane because they couldn't utilize or like understood his kit and positioning. This actually, this is pretty much the same situation as what I was talking about with Akaali earlier.
It made him catch some nerfs. But instead of maintaining that feeling of playing Aurelion Sol, they gave him a massive rework that now makes him feel like just a shell of what he was. The fun that we had with the identity of Aurelion Sol was axed.
Damn. I don't know the rework. I'm pretty sure I quit before then. But that's unfortunate. Once again, it's the problem with the design in the first place. It was just too overtuned and too easily abused by professional players.
Goals was to enhance his dragon theme. And what do dragons do? Well, they breathe fire, of course.
I find that more and more games will have balancing problems of some sort, and the balancing pass tends to kill the identity that made it fun in the first place. Another example, because I'm still mad about it, the Tyranids in Warhammer. They had an ability revolving around their adaptability. That's like their thing. The ability to adapt to the enemy they're fighting and have it shore up their weaknesses.
That makes sense.
But because Tyranids were too powerful, they forced you to have it
59% win
into
rate?
your list before you even saw your opponent's army, you know, so you can no longer adapt to your opponent. That's literally the point of Tyranids, and it really wasn't the reason why the faction was crushing people, because they still are, but they lost that fun Tyranid style identity to them. Perfect balance in a game is always something that's desired, but I feel like that it might not actually be a good thing.
All right, what's your argument here? Because
I want to argue
it's all about the fun.
Opposite. Obviously, removing any major outliers is important, things that are so game-breaking that need to be hotfixed, but the essence of an unbalanced game, I think, makes it in a way more fun, so long as the identity is preserved. For example, let's go back to Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2 is one of the best FPS games of all time. It's a gem of a title. It is not balanced in the slightest, and not in the like, oh, some of the best games of our childhood, Modern Warfare 2, weren't balanced at all. But like back then, you can kind of get away with worse balance because times were different. Titanfall 2 is not that old, and it is not balanced. Argue to me that this game is balanced, and I'll respond with a Jesus photo speaking the words of Stimcar and Monarch Titan. But if we take, let's say, Big Daddy Scorch, objectively the worst Titan in the game, and yes, you know I'm right, I don't care how much you love him, he's objectively the weakest, he still serves a function. Scorch is area denial and short-range burst damage. It's really hard to get it in, fundamentally, because in a game like this, there'll just be certain maps and scenarios that are very long range, very open, and he just won't get his damage in. But he wasn't changed to suit those means. His kit wasn't adjusted in a way to make up for that weakness. He was given buffs here and there to help him out, but he is still fundamentally Scorch and had a die-hard group of players exactly for that reason.
This is a really good point because players get attached to the identity of the characters or the playstyle that they have fun playing. So even if it's not meta, there's going to be somebody out there who enjoys playing it as long as its identity is maintained, right? And in this case, I feel like it's more like, yeah, the character is true to its identity, but because of how the game as a whole works, it's not really the best pick out there, which again is just a normal consequence of having different play styles in the same video game. So I can kind of see where Bricky's going to go with this. And I would say that I agree. It doesn't matter if the character isn't balanced, as long as it's fun for the person playing it, or the hardcore group of fans that will continue to main this character, right?
Despite being the worst Titan still in the game, he wasn't worse by a massive margin, and he was still incredibly fun, and he maintained his identity without having to massively rework the character, the Titan, whatever. How about another option? A metagame can be created entirely due to the aspect of
Magic the
imbalance.
Gathering.
Top tier weapons or characters reign supreme, which can change the landscape of the game itself. This leads to unintended side effects, like certain weapons or characters that normally weren't that good finding a place because they are a counter pick.
As a counter, yeah. This I also agree with. When you see those rogue decks suddenly pop up because everybody's playing the one tier 1 or tier 0 meta deck, I'm talking about this in like card game standards. Like, you might not win as much, but it's so goddamn fun to play that exact counter pick against the meta. You just feel like an underdog, and whenever you achieve victory, it just feels so much sweeter than just playing the best pick. And I mean, maybe playing the meta deck is, you know, fun for most people out there, or some people out there. I mean, that's fine. As long as everybody's enjoying what they're doing, then win or lose, I think that's good game design. Well, good game design is a very broad term. I'll probably take that back. It can lead to a fun game. How about that?
Against that OP thing. My favorite gun in Destiny 2 is Malfeasance. It's a gorgeous hand cannon with a trait where 5 consecutive shots will detonate 5 explosives, attack.
Not really in the Destiny circle, but I've heard it's kind of dying due to microtransactions.
To them. Now, this naturally makes it pretty good for some PvE scenarios, but pretty bad for PvP, where enemies tend to die far before those 5 shots. However, Warlocks use their ability called a Rift to give them a little bit of extra damage or healing, and they would put on this fancy helmet called the Stag. The Stag would make them significantly tankier in that Rift and allow them to take fights that were overall just that they really should not have taken those fights. They would have died much easier. I found a place for Malfeasance dealing with those Stag Warlocks. The meta evolves further, where tons of overshields utilized by Titans were prevalent. Malfeasance was an excellent choice against.
Here's a different scenario where you can get a combination of things that maybe aren't the best, but when combined together are actually pretty good against what's currently meta. When you discover something like that, oh man, it's such a good feeling. And it wouldn't be possible if the game was balanced. Yeah, this is a really good point.
Them who would get overly greedy and then find themselves insta-gibbed by the explosions. Tons of roaming supers making their way into the game. I use it to deal with them from range. Build crafting, both in co-op and competitive games, can wildly change due to imbalance, and that keeps the game feeling fresh and promoting discussion. They say that all press is good press, and when there is a rallying hatred for something overpowered in a game, or at least discussion around it, the game is firmly in people's minds. Hell, memes are created regarding that imbalance, which keeps people talking. If everything's the same and perfect balance is achieved, I think it just ends up being a bit boring to think about. Malfeasance is a pretty mediocre PvP pick, but it has its place and it has its identity, and for that, I love it more than any other meta weapon. Same reason why I love like Cerberus +1, because in a crazy hectic gunfight, yeah, your time to kill might be something specific, but that's a perfect time to kill. What if you're missing shots? I got too many barrels, I'm not gonna miss my shots. Now, despite all of this, limits should obviously be put in place. There are dials that can be tweaked with all values in games, and they should be if it helps achieve a better semblance of balance overall, so long as they don't step on the toes of what made it fun in the first place. Now, I'm sure right now in your mind, right, you could think of a time in insert game here where the thing you loved had to get nerfed or buffed in some way that ruined why you loved it. My poor Stockholm Syndrome League of Legends fans can think of many a reworked champions that probably go into this list. And
well, there you go. Oh man, I feel so bad for all the Akali mains, like pre-rework. Like, they had found their place and their playstyle, and then it was just uprooted into the mess that it is. I primarily mained Shen top lane, and back in the day when Shen was just spamming Q and throwing his sword, I thought that was pretty fun. The game was incredibly unbalanced, and I believe there was back during the time when the game got first released and there was a tank meta and everybody was just like building HP and nobody would die in an actual fight because there was just so much regen. That was really bad overall in retrospect, but I had fun playing it. Not gonna lie though, I do kind of like the new Shen rework and how he plays now, but still, I kind of miss the old Shen.
Hey, if you want to tell me about some of them, please, put it down there, I know this has been sort of like a poorly formulated topic, but I worry that people online push changes quicker than should be made. Yet no game developer in the history of working has ever said, yeah, guys, I think we should definitely make our game less fun so it can be more balanced. Nobody ever says that. Everyone who makes games know that the fun is #1. But I can imagine sometimes when the online discourse is just fervent, when every tweet is hit with a nerf X instantaneously, level heads might weaken, and a quick fix is implemented just to get those people to shut up. I don't think they know that's what's happening, but I know I've been subconsciously swayed by idiots on the internet before. You are not immune to propaganda. I just have been like thinking about all the past league reworks when I used to play. Look at all those that landed and all those that didn't. It made me realize that almost all the games I play or used to play are pretty unbalanced, like Destiny, League, Overwatch, Titanfall, Dead by Daylight, For Honor. Like my whole retinue of titles struggled with balance a ton. Some kept their identity and some didn't. And figuring out the differences is really fun. Okay, so I'm sorry, I got on Fortnite a bit ago.
Oh no.
Someone told me about the no build and I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And it was actually pretty good. I was kind of surprised at how decent no build was. But there was the Dragon Ball. Oh God, how does that one guy say it? That like Dragon Ball Kamehameha thing was so ludicrously unbalanced. It was nearly an insta kill and it's just so dumb. But I remember it being just an absolute blast with how stupid and fun it was that I kind of didn't really care. In a weird way, like having a boogeyman is almost fun. A character or a gun in a game that everyone can kind of rally against and hate on. I mean, it's not good when they just hate it on the person who's using it, but it can feel sometimes kind of nice to have that like connective glue in the community. Shit, I look back at
to have that one super OP character, and as I mentioned, seeing somebody like face off against them and somehow as the underdog beat them, it's just so good. I mean, isn't that one of the appeals of Dark Souls? That you're defeating an opponent that is nigh impossible for you to defeat, and yet somehow you're able to do it through like sheer tenacity. Isn't that why the Millennia boss fight in Elden Ring is such a pivotal moment for people? Well, I mean, there's also the lore reason and stuff like that. I think for the most people, it's overcoming that impossible challenge of a character that is extremely unbalanced with a move that is nigh impossible to dodge or avoid, and yet somehow you still come out on top. And you wouldn't have that if it was balanced.
Like For Honor, I think about like Orochi, the little weeaboo samurai guy, and the stigma that went with him, and it was just kind of fun in a weird way. I don't know. It was enjoyable. Hell, I mean, Mass Effect, right? Mass Effect 3 even found a way to fix this without literally adjusting anything. In the third game's multiplayer, there were absolutely maps and enemies that were best for farming credits. Firebase Glacier was really small, and the Geth were the easiest of the enemies. It was really easy to just load up Geth, load up Firebase Glacier, and speed run through it. But instead of saying like buffing the Geth or changing the Firebase Glacier map, they just gave you incentives to go random. You got extra experience if you chose random map and extra experience if you chose random enemy. Why make these massive changes to all that stuff when you can just say, hey, just don't pick them. Pick random. We'll give you more stuff for it. Sometimes just incentivizing people to use other things is all you need to help adjust the metagame. Even if the metagame is Mass Effect 3's multiplayer economy. There are die-hard players in tons of different kinds of games that are entirely focused on playing the fun mediocre pick. And if you try too hard to make that fun mediocre pick something it's not, you might make a more balanced game, but you make a less interesting one. And some of the best games out there are not balanced at all. And as far as I'm concerned, a massive emphasis on sticking to an identity first and foremost is more important than any level of balance you can achieve in the game.
Honestly, this is a pretty old video, and Bricky has made a ton more after this, so he's probably gone over this, but yeah. The dude really shouldn't be afraid to voice his opinions. This was actually pretty well articulated, and a lot of the points that he made, I pretty much agree with. And I mean, I play card games. Those are basically some of the most unbalanced games out there, and yet it's just, there is that aspect of fun to it when you play a rogue deck and somehow beat the meta, despite, you know, having a less than 50% win rate and the fact that you can't climb up any ranked ladder with that deck. But it's just, it's your deck, and it's your way of having fun with the game. And that wouldn't be possible if the game was balanced. So yeah, this isn't really something that I thought about, but yeah, it's actually what happens. For any of you guys watching this who play Yu-Gi-Oh, Witchcrafter's best deck, by the way. But yeah, that was actually really refreshing. Doing a bit of a different kind of video than the usual video game lore that we do here on the channel. So if you guys want to see more stuff like this, let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you guys enjoyed. I'll catch you guys in the next one.